I'm Patrick Byers, Horticulture Field Specialist with University of Missouri Extension. Thank you for joining us for our video series, Practical Advice from Successful Farmers. Today the subject is business models, and we'll be learning from Curtis Milsap of Millsap Farms near Springfield, Missouri.
Welcome to Millsap Farm. I'm Curtis Millsap, and my wife Sarah and I have been farming here at Millsap Farm for 17 years. We actually started the farm a little bit before that, but we moved to this property 17 years ago, and that's when we started our farming career in earnest. Neither one of us grew up on farms. We say farming skipped a generation in our family. Our grandparents both had property and were farmers or farmer adjacent. Her in Colorado, me here in Missouri. And so when we grew up, we were in town, or in her case, sort of the suburbs of Denver. I was here in Springfield, Missouri, where our farm is now. And we both grew up with big gardens and with families who cared deeply about good food and nutrition and active outside lives, but we didn't actually grow up on farms. So when we started considering what we were going to do, farming as a married couple, when we started considering that, farming sort of rose to the top based on several criteria, but the biggest one being that it's a great way to intersect our loves of being outside and community. And so that's really what our farm is about community and this getting to do this amazing work we get to do outside. I would not be at all interested in an indoor farming career, so that's part of what we love about it. When we started 17 years ago, we started with a very small CSA. I think our first CSA meeting had about 5 people show up, and 3 of them signed up for a CSA share, which still amazes me that 3 people thought that we were a good bet. And so that season we had about 25 CSA members, and we went to the farmers market here in Springfield. It was the Greater Springfield Farmers Market was the one we were attending at the time. It was an interesting learning experience going to farmers market for the first time. One bit of wisdom that we had gleaned was that our farmers market had an exclusion list, crops you could not grow your first year. So we actually signed up to be members the year before, and then we showed up to sell stuff the second year, and that was a nice little sidestep of a rule that would have been a problem for us. But that first year when we showed up, the first season to sell when we showed up, I remember showing up with trays of beautiful basil plants and all sorts of flowers and we were basically selling seedlings at that point early in the season. And this was probably the first week of April. And it was snowing sideways on a mall parking lot. And so welcome to the farming life. That was quite a way to introduce yourself to the farming world, trying to keep your basil from dying. So we started with that first season. We had some farmers market success. Our CSA worked out pretty well. By the fall, we were looking at the winter and going, okay, so we managed to make it through the summer, mostly on farm income. I did a couple of side jobs. I was doing construction at the time, and so I had done a few little side jobs to kind of keep the bills paid. But for the most part, we'd earned some income from farming, and it was working. But we could see that the winter, the money we had made wasn't going to carry us through the winter, so we were going to need to generate income in the winter. And of course, then we had a decision to make. Are we going to go farm year-round? And so then we're going to try and sell stuff through the winter, or are we going to kind of take winters off and I might need to earn other income in the winter? And so in our case, we decided to do the year-round farming. And that was influenced largely by Elliott Coleman and his book, The Winter Harvest Manual, and also by the fact that people eat, it turns out, very regularly, 360 some days a year, most of us, and several times a day if we can get it. And so we thought, well, the people are wanting to buy the food. There are people, farmers around the country producing food through the winter now. We should give that a shot. And so we sold some winter CSA shares. And we did have an advantage here. We have a big greenhouse that was on the property when we bought it, a 6,000 square foot greenhouse. So that was a big addition. Although at that point we were still doing a lot of renovations and trying to get that into a condition to really grow a lot of food. It had been used primarily to grow seedlings and plants before that. And so we moved a lot of soil in to create raised beds and to grow vegetables in that greenhouse. So that was kind of our beginning. We grew fairly steadily there for a while. I think 3 years, we kind of just increased a little bit each time. So we went from that half acre to maybe 3/4, and then we went to about an acre, or a little more than an acre the next year. And then in 2010, we were offered the opportunity to use land next door to us. this adjacent landowner, had 10 acres he was not using. And he said, hey, you want to farm this? And I said, yeah, that sounds great. We've done so well with 1.5 acres. Let's grow 7 acres of vegetables. And of course, that was a disaster on many levels, but primarily because we didn't have enough labor to do weed control. We didn't have enough water to keep everything irrigated. And we really didn't have enough of a budget to get fertility out on all that. So we were essentially trying to grow vegetables without enough water, without enough fertility, without enough labor. And so I've said these words, let's get the brush hog out and see if there's any carrots under those weeds. And that is a great way to grow weeds, not a great way to grow carrots. So in 2012, we shrank. At the same time, and I haven't really referenced this, but we were doing pastured poultry alongside our vegetables. In a typical year, we would do about 1,000 meat birds and had several hundred laying hens. And then we also did turkeys, sometimes as many as 200, I think we tried to do 400 turkeys one year. I don't think we ever succeeded quite that number. And then we had some hogs as well, and we're doing a little bit of farrow to finish pork, and then selling a lot of piglets as well. So all these things, all these pieces of the puzzle were kind of coming together. But in 2010, it really reached a head in terms of just not having enough time. And so in 2010, we said, well, we're going to give up the animals, because I was clearly wired up, more inclined toward vegetables and plants than I was toward animals. And mostly that's a matter of my time frame and things, my commitments I want to make. I really like having free weekends. I like having the ability to go and do things and take a day away from the farm. And with animals, that was very, very difficult. With vegetables, that was much more practical. So in 2011, we cut the animals out, but we're still doing that 7 acres of vegetables. And it helped. Our lives got a little bit less chaotic, but we still had way too much on the ground, trying to tend way too much out in the field. And so that year, it was a pretty dry year in the summertime. And so in 2011, I had a really kind of a moment of truth where I realized this is not working. If we're going to continue, we're going to have to shrink this farm drastically, and we're going to have to figure out a way to do more with less in terms of labor and expenses and things like that. So 2011 was that sort of epiphany year. 2012 turned out to be the biggest drought year that anybody had seen in the Ozarks for probably 70 years, certainly since the 50s. And so we had a good bit of rain in the spring, but then on May 1st, the water spigot turned off. It stopped raining, and it didn't rain again until the 1st of September. So long, hot, dry summer. We were already hitting temperatures in the 90s in the beginning of May. And that year we had retracted to our own property, so we weren't using anybody's borrowed property at that point. And we had about 2 acres of vegetables growing. And that 2 acres actually produced more income, gross and net, than we had on the 7 acres the year before. And additionally, we had a much better quality of life. We had a better daily cycle. I mean, we were actually making headway each day instead of finding ourselves at the end of each day going, oh my goodness, we've got more to do than we started with. It was actually starting to make sense. So that's what brought us to the point where we said, well, 2 acres is about right for us. And so we've held that line pretty closely for the last 13 years. We're basically a 2 to 2.5 acres of vegetable and cut flower production. And so we've grown internally. So our income has expanded considerably within that same footprint. We've gotten better at using our ground. We've gotten better at taking care of the soil. We've gotten better at irrigation, crop protection, and then making sure we, as they say, harvest what we plant. That's kind of the criteria for success anymore for us is, are we harvesting what we plant? Once we put the effort into prepping a bed and getting it into the ground, let's make sure that it's tended and cared for in a way that it's going to come out with a productive harvest. So that's kind of been a guiding principle. We've added some other profit centers over the years, some agritourism. We've gone to more farmers markets and less farmers markets over the year. We do a big CSA nowadays. And so we can dig into all those enterprises as we talk about those specifically. But the farm is big, it's diverse. I mean, it's big from my perspective in terms of how many people I manage. For example, I just did taxes for 2023. And so in 2023, we had 25 employees who generated tax documents. Okay, so some of those people were people who were here every day, all day long. Most of them were people who were part-time, came and went, on a maybe a weekly basis, but a wide range of workers as well. We've had people who've been with us for, my farm manager, Kimby, has now been with me for, I think, close to 12 years. And then we've got people who, call me on a weekly basis, hey, I'd love to come and volunteer and learn something. And oftentimes those people, if that works out over time, they may develop into an hourly or even a salaried worker and really take a place in the farm crew. So a big crew, relatively small plot of land. We've got 25 acres total, and on that we grow about 2.5 to 3 acres of vegetables and cut flowers. But we also have a lot of covered space. So we have, I think, about 30,000 square feet of covered space nowadays. So that's about a quarter to even a third of our total production space is under cover. And that really helps us control some of the challenges the climate throws at us, helps us be more predictable and reliable producers. So it helps in our marketing as well. So then we know when we tell somebody we'll grow tomatoes for you, that we really have a very good chance of being able to do that, both based on the covered space and also on our experience. So that's kind of an overview of the history of the farm, and now we'll dig into individual enterprises. Let's talk a little bit about one of my favorite enterprises on the farm, which is the CSA, Community Supported Agriculture Program. The CSA was how we got started, that and Farmers Market. And essentially, it is a group of members who say up front, we want to be part of this farm this year. They pay us to be members of the farm, and then they get a box of produce each week during the growing season. Now, over the years, it's shifted. Initially, we sold, I think, just one size of box, and we had about 25 members. And so, whatever was in that box, that was what you got. And so my family always says, I'm a big family, we say, we get what you get, you don't throw a fit. Unfortunately, that's not really how consumers work. They get what they get, but they might throw a fit. And so over the years, we worked toward moving our CSA from sort of a traditional one-size-fits-all box into a lot of different ways of meeting the consumer needs. And so, for example, we added sizes almost right away. We said, well, it makes sense to me that a family, a single person is not going to eat the same amount of produce as a family of 4 or 5. So we made different size boxes. And then some people would say, well, I really, even this small box is too much produce for me. I really want to be part of the CSA, but how could I? So then we went to every other week boxes for some folks, and that worked out pretty easily, pretty simply for us. We would just put kind of an A group and a B group, and we would try and keep those groups balanced. And at this point, we were still mostly managing this through just a spreadsheet and handwork. And then not too far into our CSA program, a program called Small Farm Central came along. It was Simon at Small Farm Central was one of the first software developers to look at what we were doing and say, wow, these guys' lives could be made much better by a fairly simple piece of software. And so Simon Huntley built that out, and we were taken from the word go, because that was definitely not a strength of ours, managing all that stuff at the desk. So his software managed payments, managed membership signups, and then managed when people should get boxes. So you could have an every other week share, you could have an array of sizes, and all that could be spit on a pick list or a box list, and then we would know what to pick. And then he started experimenting with customization. And of course, this was the gold standard for all CSAs, was how do we make sure that the CSA member who loves beets gets their beets every week, but also the CSA member who really never wants to see beets in their share never gets those beets. Because beets, onions, there's arugula, there's a whole bunch of vegetables that are fairly polarizing. People have strong feelings about them one way or the other. And so we had done lots of customer surveys by then and realized there was no crop mix that would make everybody happy. If we did enough beets, some people just were going to hate those beets. And if we didn't have them, a lot of people were going to miss them, and so on. So customization was a big deal. So Simon came up with a program called Harvey, and it's basically an algorithm. And we've been using it now for years. I don't think there's any going back. It makes our customers so much more satisfied, and it really fits their needs very well. And specifically what that means is that on a Thursday afternoon, Kimby and I walk the fields, my farm manager Kimby and I walk the fields. We look at what's available. How many vegetables how many heads of lettuce can we harvest? How many pounds of tomatoes do we think we'll have? And then we look through our cooler, how many hundreds of pounds of potatoes are still in here, how many hundreds of pounds of carrots, and so on. We collect all that into what we call a harvest list, and we put that into Harvey, and then we generate shares. And all that means is we push a button, but the algorithm does the work, and it goes through and it sorts what we've got available into the box sizes and values that we've sold to allow people, and it uses, in the sorting, it uses their preferences. They've gone in advance and rated kohlrabi from 1 to 5, either love it or hate it. I always put this in my box or never put this in my box, or something neutral. And so Harvey, the algorithm Harvey, goes through and takes our harvest list and sorts it out into those people's individual boxes based on their preferences. So right out of the gate, they've got a modified box that's modified in such a manner that it should be favorable for them, right? And that's wonderful. Then part 2 of that is they get that email on Friday. They have Saturday and Sunday to modify their box further. So if they want to go in and let's say, oh, we love kohlrabi, but this week we really are trying to make a big batch of salsa, and so we'd love to have a bunch of onions, garlic, and peppers, tomatoes, then they can swap their kohlrabi for other vegetables, or vice versa. If they see something they like, they can swap, and if they see something that they like it, but they don't want to swap, they just want to buy it, they also have the capacity to do that, so they can add things to their share. So, of course, all this comes at a cost, and with Harvey, it's around 7%. So that's a steep price to pay, but at the same time, it mostly ended our discontent with the CSA. There were always a few folks who would quit the CSA pretty early on, saying, yeah, it just doesn't work for me. I just can't have this level of unpredictability and unknowability about what I'm going to get, and then I just don't like beets. I just don't like arugula or whatever, or vice versa. I'm just not getting enough of the things I really want. I'm going to go back to buying at the farmer's market because I want that fennel and beets and arugula every week and I can get it. So it really short-circuited that. It gave people a voice, and it gave people an opportunity to, it's almost like a game for them now to go in and swap their share and build the best vegetable share they can find. And then for us, on our end, it looks like on Monday morning, we print a pick list. It's an overall pick list. And Tuesday morning, we print the individual pack labels. Every box gets a label, goes on the box. We lay out all the vegetables that we have harvested in sort of a buffet line. And we walk down through there we have a little rolly conveyor, and we just shop out of those boxes of vegetables into this delivery box that's going to go out to this individual. So, first step in modifying our CSA was finding ways to customize the share, whether that was size, frequency, and then eventually even customizing the specific contents of the share, all with an eye toward making sure that these folks have as much chance at being satisfied as possible. The other modification we made that's along those same lines was starting to do deliveries. And we resisted that for quite a while. Delivery raises a whole nother level of logistics. But the truth is, a lot of people are living really busy lives, and whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, it's a reality. And so expecting them to make the trip to the farm, for most of these people, we're about 4 miles outside of Springfield. It's not a big drive, but if you're on the south side of Springfield, it's a 30-minute drive, or maybe a 40-minute drive. Well, that's a long way for them to go and pick up a box of vegetables each week. So it made sense both ecologically and economically for us to provide a delivery service. And so this was about the time that my kids were getting the driving age. And so it's worked out pretty well. We've been able, mostly my kids, but others also have been able to earn a really nice amount of cash by delivering these shares. So we just pass that money through. We keep $1, $1.50 for packing the shares and for maintaining the boxes. And we use reusable buckhorn totes. But the rest of that money goes to them, and they make a lot of money on a weekly basis making that delivery route and delivering the shares door to door. And we also have some pickup sites in town where we take a bulk group of boxes. And then we still have about 60 to 70 members who pick up on farm. We're nowadays running about 250 members. It peaked during COVID at closer to 350. It's backed off just a little bit. We've also added a lot of things to our CSA beyond just what we produce. So that includes things like melons and sweet corn from some of the Amish growers in the area, but also can include even things as out of the box as ground beef, or cuts of beef from grass-fed local beef growers, or chicken from some of our pasture-raised chicken folks. So we really have a wide range of products. Our goal when somebody picks a CSA share from Millsap Farm is they potentially could do all their grocery shopping for the week, or at least the vast majority of it, right there in that box. So there's going to be protein options, including cheese and meat. There's going to be eggs as well. There's going to be all the vegetables they could want. And then usually there's a fruit option as well. For years we did that as a separate add-on share, but over the years we've moved it into the main share, which has given me a lot more flexibility, because in the Ozarks you have to produce a fruit share every week. It can get really stressful because sometimes strawberries don't overlap with blueberries, and blueberries don't always overlap with peaches, and yada yada. And then there's the years when it gets frosted out and there are no blueberries or peaches or strawberries to be had. And so year to year, it was much less stress on me as a farmer to say, when we have fruit, we'll make it available. And when we don't, that's okay as well. So that's kind of the way our CSA works. Key things, we've always looked at it as this belongs to our customers. My CSA is not about what's convenient or easy for the farm. It's always been about what my customers would like to have. Now, it's also got great benefits for the farm, early income, a reliable customer base. For example, when we were at farmers market, and when school starts back up, it was always a frustrating deal because our attendance at market would drop by half just by the fact that school had started back up. And here we still, our tomato production didn't drop by half. The CSA is a very nice, reliable market. It is a lot of effort to do all that customization. It's a lot of effort to do all that customer communication and emails and things like that. So it's not without its costs, but in the long term, it's definitely my favorite way to sell vegetables, flowers, fruit on the farm. So that's our CSA, and we're now going into year 17 of Millsap Farm CSA, and we hope to have about 250 members this summer. So let's talk a little bit about farmers market. And of course, being a startup farmer 17 years ago, farmers market was the easy entry point. And that's what I always tell everyone. Farmers market's a great way to cut your teeth on selling produce. It's a great way to generate a lot of income. The downside of the farmers market is simply that there's no guarantee that what you harvest is going to sell. So I have many, many times taken thousands of dollars worth of stuff to market and brought home thousands of dollars worth of stuff. If it snows, if it rains, if the wind blows too hard, if it's too hot and sunny, people just won't show up and buy the produce. And it's a symptom of the fact that we just don't live in a market culture. People aren't thinking of a farmer's market as the place to go to buy their produce. So that's a complicated thing. But that said, it's a great way to get started. And the other great thing about a farmer's market, and really any regular marketing opportunity, is it will teach you discipline as a market grower as well. Where you go, well, I'm going to go to market tomorrow. I better bring as much as I possibly can, because I don't want to come home with less money than I could have. So I'm going to harvest those herbs that I look at every week and go, anybody really going to buy those herbs? I'm going to harvest all the radishes. I'm going to harvest all the cherry tomatoes, and I'm going to haul them to market. Where if you don't have a regular market scheme, it's tempting to sort of slack off on the harvest end of things. But always remember, harvest is the only place you make any money, right? Nobody's paying us to grow cherry tomatoes. Nobody's interested in how pretty the rosemary looks in the field. They only pay you when you actually hand them a bundle of rosemary or a box of cherry tomatoes. And to do that, you absolutely have to harvest them and bring them to market. So farmers market's been a great place for us to sell. Over the years, we went from having a tiny little table to 2 booths full of thousands of dollars worth of flowers and vegetables. And those have really, the farmers market has been a great place to sell the flowers even more than the vegetables. Flowers are a great product for markets because people do shop with their eyes. And so it's harder to sell a $25 flower bouquet online. You can't see it, smell it, pick it up. But when you're at market and it's just right there and you go, oh, I really want one of those, then those walk off the table pretty easily. So farmers market's great that way. It's also a great way to connect with other growers. You're in this community of growers there, and so the best farmers markets have really good interchange happening between market growers, saying, "Hey, what are you seeing in this year? What are you pests and diseases, and what's your favorite variety of this, or your least favorite variety of that?" And that networking can be a really organic and natural thing there at the farmers market. So that's great, and income-wise, the farmers market, certainly our biggest income days of all time have been farmers market days. It can be a tremendously profitable thing to do, especially around those holidays. Mother's Day, Father's Day, Valentine's Day, Memorial Day can all just be off the hook kind of sales, and that's amazing. Downside, of course, is most really big farmers markets happen on Saturdays, and I don't know anybody who really wants to work on a Saturday. It's not anybody's aspiration to put those Saturdays into the work week, but that's a reality of farmers market. If you're going to go to a big market, it's probably going to be a Saturday market. And the downside that we already talked about, which is, if it snows, sleets, sunshine's too hot, sunshine not enough, too much rain, too little rain, people won't show up, and then you take home what you brought. So it's an uncertain market, and it rewards the risk taker, but it also can really punish you for being diligent, in the sense that just because you show up doesn't mean you're necessarily selling produce. So we did farmers market for 16 years. We took the year off last year. If we can continue to do that, we will. It definitely was a huge hit financially, but boy, we enjoyed having those Saturday mornings available to do other things with, and that was really a boon for us. So anyway, that's farmers market on Millsap Farm, and it's, as I said, it's an excellent market venue. Just go into it knowing what you're getting and enjoy it while you're there, and you may be like us, where 17 years in you may decide that was enough and time to move on to other market options. All right, let's talk a little bit about agritourism. So, a wise man once told me every income should have 3 legs, right? So if you think that one job and one way of doing something is going to support you for your life, then you might be delusional, like a guy on a 2-legged stool, right? So in our case, one of the legs of our farm's income is agritourism, and that looks like a lot of different things. So for example, we can have agritourism in the form of educational tours, and we've done a lot of those. Those can be really nice pieces of income, and also a great way for us to interact with our community. I love doing school tours with kids. I'm wired up that way. I'm a teacher by nature, and so it's something I very much enjoy, but it's also something that can be pretty profitable. You can spend a morning touring 100 kids around your farm and pocket $400 or $500 at the end of the morning. So 4 hours, $500, that's not bad, right? We'll all take that. But then also there is, of course, there's legwork in that. You got to make sure that you're communicating. You got to make sure that you've got a good plan. Usually when I do those, I'll also bring in a couple extra staff members to run a couple stations, so I don't take those 100 school kids aren't all touring around with me the whole time. We'll split them up into 3 or 4 groups, and they'll do different stations, like plant a seed, dig in the compost pile, and we may have them harvest and taste a radish, that sort of thing, and then maybe an animal station as well. And so, but that's a nice piece. We enjoy doing that touring. And I think it's a really nice customer service. Most families, when I was growing up, had grandparents on the farm. At this point, when you meet kids who are in elementary school, middle school, or high school, they almost never have a farm family connection. They're pretty much always going to, even in our relatively rural corner of southwest Missouri, these are kids coming out from Springfield, Missouri, or even Fairgrove and surrounding bedroom communities. Most of them really don't have any sort of farm connections left in their lives. So this is a big deal. You're teaching them how food grows, where is it coming from, and so on. And of course, it's fair that don't muzzle the ox, as this old saying goes. So you should be able to be paid for this. It's very reasonable to say, I'm glad to host your farm tour, and it costs $3 a head, or whatever it is that you think is a reasonable. Let me point out one thing about agritourism. I almost said what you think would be a reasonable charge. That's the wrong way to think of it. In agritourism, you're not doing cost basis pricing. You're doing value basis pricing. That means, what's it worth to the person coming onto the farm? So to you and I, it might be, oh man, $5 for a farm tour? I would never pay $5 to go tour a farm. But for your average city person who wants to have this farm experience, that's nothing. I mean, they're going to spend less than that going to McDonald's, right? They're going to spend more than that driving across town to get to your farm. So don't be hesitant to price it what it's worth to them, not what it's worth to you. Always remember that in agritourism, and generally, I would say across the board, farmers tend to undervalue their products because we're all thrifty and sort of, on tight budgets, so to speak, and that's admirable in us, but let's not confuse ourselves with our customers. Make sure our customers are paying a price that they're okay with, but also that it's high enough that you actually are earning what you should be for that service you're providing. So anyway, school tours are great. We do college and high school groups as well. Sometimes most of those are paying groups. There are some of those older groups where we'll do them on work trade. So if a college group wants to come out and do a tour, but they're okay with doing an hour tour and then doing an hour and a half of weeding, that's a decent trade for me generally as well. I'll also do trades with longtime friends, and there's always special cases, but in general you should expect to get paid for these things. Other agritourism that we do, we have a little Air B&B now, and that's been a really great addition to the farm. It's a stable, relatively stable form of income, and stable in a sense that it's steady, but also stable in the sense that it's not subject to the vagaries of the weather. So the carrot crop, the tomato crop, all those can be severely impeded by how the weather goes. But when you talk about an Airbnb, that's just really not affected by weather. So that's great. And then we have pizza night. And pizza night's another form of agritourism. It's a on-farm pizza, wood-fired pizza. We host about 300 people every Thursday night from May to October. We have live music. We do a lot of the toppings on the pizza from the fields. And it's held in the middle of the farm in this amazing agrarian setting where people say things like, I didn't know there were things like this anymore, and wow, this is such an amazing place. It's a great way for us to connect our farm to our community, and it's quite financially viable as well. So our big pizza night is a $4,000 a night event, and of course some of that does go back into ingredients and labor and expenses, but still it's a very profitable enterprise, and it's a great way for us to earn income, meet the needs of our community, and also educate our community. We do a farm tour each pizza night. It's optional, but I usually get about 25 to 30 people join me for a farm tour. And those people also become our CSA members, our farmers market customers. They may send their kids out for a farm tour. It's a great way to connect those dots and also for them to start to get an idea of what it means to be a farmer in our modern environment. That small farming is a viable and important way to earn a living. It's an important way to steward the earth. It's a great way for us to connect community members to the world. And so we really like our agritourism adventures for that reason. It's a great way to boost income. It's a great way to divorce at least part of your income from the vagaries of the weather. And it's also a really nice way to bring community into your farm, which generates social capital and also helps you do the things that got into this in the first place, which is to share these beautiful things, the beautiful work you get to do with the rest of the world. So that's agritourism on Millsap Farm. The flowers are a great opportunity for season extension, right? So flowers really reward you for space in tunnels, and different varieties of flowers can be produced all through the year. So, very early season flowers like anemones, ranunculus, snapdragons can be blooming for Mother's Day. Throughout the summer, we can crank out all those summer heat lovers like zinnias and marigolds and sunflowers. And then we've got shoulder season flowers as well. The point is, you can grow flowers 12 months a year without any problem. It's a fairly simple thing to do. And that's nice. It keeps your cash flow going. The only downside of that, of course, is then if you're not careful, you never have any time off. And so we have scheduled 2 months of our calendar where we don't sell flowers, and that'd be December, January. And then by the beginning of February, we're back into flower sales, and that'll really go until the end of November. Of course, we're always growing flowers. There are always flowers in the ground, but it's kind of a nice balance between extending the season and yet also finding a way to have some time off and not feel like we have to go pick the flowers every day. So flowers have become a really important part of our mix, and I don't see us going back anytime soon. At this point, about 40% of our sales are flowers, and that's a similar space in the field. It takes up about 40% of the space in the field. So flowers are a big part of Millsap Farms, and we don't see ourselves leaving them behind anytime soon. So let's talk a little bit about farm stand sales. And here we're talking about kind of two versions. We've got our brick and mortar farm stand, which is here at the front of the farm. And it's just a two-door reach-in glass fronted cooler. We've done different permutations of that over the years. At one point it was a shelf inside the main walk-in cooler. We've now transitioned to a glass fronted cooler out in the open. But that's a really nice, simple, low-hanging fruit. It's not for us become a really big profit center, but at the same time, it moves, you know, on a good day, $50 of product. So, well, that's not too bad, right? $300 a week, we'll take it. I've seen, and of course all of us have experienced farm stands that were selling much, much more than that. So that's probably mostly a result of our lack of focus on that, and our intent has never really been to be a public-facing farm in that sense, like moment to moment. We really enjoy the ebb and flow of public. So having pizza night and CSA pickup and those kinds of things be sort of intensive public-facing opportunities, but then for the most of the time we're kind of left alone to do our work by ourselves, and that's appreciated. But farm stands still a contributor to the economy, and as we age, as Sarah and I age, we've considered maybe we will boost the farm stand a bit and be able to back away from our other marketing venues, because the nice thing about farm stand is we don't have to go anywhere. We don't have to pick up and haul produce anywhere. We just have to get it from the field into the farm stand. And that's pretty low-hanging fruit as far as getting something sold. So that's been nice. Now, the other version of farm stand we do is an online farm stand. And this works as such. We walk the fields on Thursdays. We generate an email from that field walk that says, this is what's available. We happen to use Harvey because that's what we already use for our CSA, but there's 101 great software programs out there nowadays to manage sales this way. You generate a list that has pictures. Of course, the initial setup of all those products is a little bit complicated. You got to make sure you have good pictures, you got to have good descriptions. But then once you get that, then it's mostly going down a list and toggling on and off and giving quantities and saying what's available. And then you open a sales period. Close the sales period after a certain number of days, a certain amount of publicity. You're going to do Facebook, Instagram, an email, whatever that looks like. Even text. People are now using some text utilities. We haven't done that, but we use all the others, Facebook, Instagram, and email, to reach out to people. And then in our case, on that Thursday crop walk, Friday email, then Monday morning we would shut down sales and we would print off a pick list, which would tell us what to pick. And then on Tuesday morning, we would print off labels that tell us who ordered each of these items, and they get a list put on the side of their box as a sticker, and then we fill their box from the produce that we've picked. And then some of them get home delivery, some of them come out and pick up on the farm, but whatever method we use to get it to them, that usually happens on Tuesday. And that's been really nice. That really, we had not done much of that until COVID. During COVID, it was a huge way to sell stuff. It's like DoorDash for vegetables or whatever you want to call it. And so it meets people where they are in terms of convenience and functionality. They like that part a lot. The part that is a little bit hard is getting people in the habit of being a weekly purchaser. So that has been a challenge for us, an ongoing challenge. Things that help are offering premiums. So, for example, a couple years back, we were gifted a crate of daffodil bulbs. And so we said, hey, free with your order this week, 3 daffodil bulbs. And man, orders, skyrocketed for that week. And then the next week, we ended up with some extra onion plants. And so we said, hey, this week, if you order, you get a bundle of onion plants. So, until you run out of premiums, that works really well. And maybe that's what it takes. We haven't been consistent enough over time probably to really say how that works best. But it's a great way to sell stuff in that, it fits our lifestyle, fits our time frame, and it seems to support our customers in the lifestyle they've chosen as well. So those are the two versions of farm stand on Millsap Farm, both fairly minor contributors to the bottom line, but also good ways that we interact with our community through the season, and a nice way to trickle out this, say for example, January, February produce when there's just not that much available. It's kind of nice not to have a 250 member CSA looking down the barrel at that, or trying to haul stuff to farmers market and really only having a few $100s worth of stuff to sell. So the farm stand is nice for picking up those little extra pieces that aren't overwhelming. So the last sales technique we're going to talk about, a kind of an entrepreneurial aspect of Millsap Farms, is sales to institutions. So we've talked about sales to all sorts of different venues, but the one that kind of came and went for us more than most was grocery stores and restaurant sales. Now, let's talk about the pros and cons of these things. So for us, restaurant sales, we still do some restaurant sales. We still have some very good customers who are restaurants. But the quantity that each restaurant buys tends to be variable. And it tends to be variable based on what they want to serve and what we have available and so on. So it's a little bit hard to predict. And we've never really focused in on restaurants enough to start building our crop plan around what a restaurant would want, which is probably the way to do it. Instead, we've always kind of used the restaurants as extensions of our already existing marketing methods. So if we were doing farmers market and CSA, which is historically on our farm been the primary way we sell stuff, then the restaurants were kind of an afterthought of, oh yeah, we've got extra this, this, and this. Let's offer it to the restaurants and see if they want it. So that's not a great way to approach a market, right? But at the same time, it's nice to have somebody who says, yeah, I want some of those extra head lettuces. I'd love to have, 50 pounds of potatoes and so on. For us, restaurant orders work similar to others, which is we send out a message. Primarily anymore, we're doing text. Originally, we tried email for many years, and email sometimes works with certain chefs, but most chefs really don't pay much attention to their email, and so we found text to be much more effective. So we send them a text. We say, this is what we've got available this week. They get back with us within a day and say, great, this is what we'd like to have. Well, ideally, they get back to us within a day. We harvest, package, and then deliver it to their restaurant, usually within 48 hours or so. So pretty quick turnaround. And that's the cycle they're used to. So it's important to mention, with all customers, it's important to understand what are customers accustomed to, what do they want, and let's try and meet them in those places or improve on it if we can't do exactly what they've been doing so far. So restaurants are typically going to order, say, on a Friday for a Monday delivery or Tuesday delivery, or they're going to order on a Monday, Tuesday for a Friday delivery. And that cycle is kind of their most common cycle. And restaurant orders, it's really about finding the right restaurant and having a relationship with that chef, at least get your foot in the door. And then once you're an established presence in the restaurant, then it may be simpler. Sometimes chefs can change and you can keep supplying. Other times we've found that when chefs change, we're back to the starting point. We have to go and rearrange, reestablish that relationship, reconnect with the new buyer, and so on. Now, the other sort of similar institution, but different in many ways, is a grocery store. The biggest difference between a restaurant and a grocery store is probably volume. Most restaurants are just not going to buy a tremendous amount of produce. Of course, they cook a lot of food, but if you look at your average restaurant plate, the portion of that that's produce is relatively small, and that produce gets stretched out over a lot of plates. So, you're not going to sell a restaurant, for example, 600 pounds of kale a week. That's just not very likely. Where a really booming grocery store might actually move that quantity, 600 bundles or something of kale a week. It's possible. It's a high end, but it's possible. So that's one of the big dividing points. But the other side of that is a restaurant often pays close to retail price. That's not a problem for them necessarily, because they are dividing it out so many different ways onto so many different plates, and so their per plate contribution of a bundle of kale is small enough that it doesn't really matter to them too much if they're paying $3.50 or $4 per bundle of kale or $2 per bundle of kale. They're probably going to work it out. But if you have a grocery store, price is everything, right? Price is a big, big deal. Quality does matter. Sourcing does matter, growing methods matter, but for grocery stores, typically, more than anything else, price is going to be the king. And that's simply because they're trying to resell it. they've got to mark it up and resell it. And if they can't make a markup, then they're not going to be interested in buying your product. So restaurants, grocery stores for us, we've done those over the years. We have had at some points good relationships with grocery stores that lasted for several years. Well, we've never carried any big grocery store accounts, and that's probably mostly because we've always considered it a secondary market for ourselves, not a primary market. So for us, grocery store sales were more to small, locally owned, sort of health food style grocery stores, and that was good while it lasted. But then every time the produce manager would change, we'd have to shuffle and relearn what they were interested in, and then also there was always an education piece there, because these aren't large grocery store operators who understand their work. They've been trained to be produce manager. These are people who kind of come in from maybe somewhere else in the store, or maybe they're new hires, and they think it sounds cool to manage the produce, but they haven't actually done something like that before. And so there's a learning curve saying, well, you shouldn't order, for example, 2 pounds of butternut squash. What are you going to do with that? or you probably shouldn't order 25 cases of kale. You're probably not going to sell all that before it goes bad. So helping them learn that stuff, holding their hand a little bit, is a useful piece of it. And as most marketing, a lot of it is still relational. You've got to get to know those produce managers and understand their needs, what they would like to see, what they're used to paying, and those kinds of things. But grocery store sales, they can be great sales, and we have some friends who do almost exclusively grocery store sales and are very happy with it. It just has not been something that we've focused a lot of time and energy on, and especially, I'd say, it's probably been about 7 years out of the 17 years that we've been farming. Probably the last 7 we haven't done any grocery store sales at all. We still do have some restaurants, and so that's still a little piece of the marketing puzzle for us. But those are institutional sales. You will get calls. I mean, if you're in the produce business for long at all, then you will get calls from restaurants and grocery stores and hospitals and colleges and public schools and all sorts of people who say they want to buy your produce. It has been our experience that getting them to actually do the buying is the tricky part. And finding a price point where that works, figuring out the logistics, all those pieces are usually where those endeavors get pretty complicated. So we've never made very many of those sales, but we do think it's a beautiful thing that needs to happen. We need to figure out how to be in those spaces, and I'm glad to see that some farmers have cracked that nut and are making it happen. So that's my perspective at Millsap Farm.
Thanks for joining us for this look at the business model here at Millsap Farm. For more information on business models and other parts of this project, practical advice from successful farmers, check out the website at webcityfarmersmarket.com. This project is made possible with generous support from the Missouri Department of Agriculture Specialty Crop Block Grant Program, and is a joint project of University of Missouri Extension, Lincoln University Cooperative Extension, and the Web City Farmers Market.